So the next stream that I mentioned of biomimicry was looking at natural systems. And this project was another botanical visitor attraction, so quite similar to the Eden project in some respects, but this time up in the north of England, between Liverpool and Manchester. And we had another tough site. It was a landfill facility. And the client, I think, just expected us to ignore the landfill because it was quite a big site. And I think they just imagined we would build something alongside it. But they'd mentioned that they wanted it to be zero carbon. And there was, it was really quite a shocking thing going to see a landfill facility. It was the first time I'd been and seen one in the flesh. And it really does bring it home to you what a ridiculous idea this is, taking all these valuable minerals and resources out of the ground, turning them into short life products and then chucking them back into the ground. It's just so last century. So we decided that we wanted to do something about this and respond to it in some way. And there was this very nice little project that we were aware of at the time called the Cardboard to Caviar project, done by the Kirklees and Calderdale Green Business Network. And in their area, they had quite a few posh restaurants. And generally speaking, this is the way that those restaurants were working. Highly packaged food stuff coming in at one end, going through the restaurant and getting a lot of food, cardboard and plastic waste at the other. Most of that was going to landfill. So what they suggested was that the food waste and the plastic waste could be separated for composting and recycling. That much is fairly obvious. The really clever bit is what they did with the cardboard waste, because they were paid to collect that. They then shredded it and sold it to equestrian centres for horse bedding. Then when that was soiled, they were paid again to collect it. They put it into wormery composting systems, which produced a lot of worms, which they fed to Siberian sturgeon, which produced caviar, which they sold back to the restaurants. Which is quite nice, because it's a bit like a form of alchemy, turning a very low-value material into a high-value material. But the other thing it's done is that it's turned a linear wasteful system into a closed-loop system. And that's exactly the way that natural systems work. In ecosystems, all the waste from one organism becomes a nutrient for some other kind of organism within the system. So we thought that was quite fun, and we thought it'd be great if we could do something as clever with our scheme. We also thought very carefully about what had worked well at the Eden project and what we might want to do slightly differently given another opportunity. And the thing that everyone seemed to relate to, every age group from school kids all the way through to saga louts, was this idea of the jungle, the rainforest. So pretty early on, we fixed on that as the concept for the project, that we were going to try and recreate a sample of rainforest on our site, and for this to be very much about ecosystems and the importance of understanding the interrelationship of species. We also thought carefully about how to get the maximum educational benefit and the maximum sort of visitor drama out of this. And we thought it'd be great if you could come in at high level, get a view out over the journey you're about to go on, maybe come in next to a waterfall so that all your senses are engaged by the heat and the steam and the sound. And then with lightweight walkways running through the treetops, you could start to explore all the vertical dimensions of the rainforest, looking at all the different ecological niches, gradually working your way down through the canopy, the subcanopy, ending up at the forest floor. And with a zoological license, they could include a whole range of animals and fulfill this educational idea about it being about ecosystems. So we still had to tackle this challenge of it being a zero carbon scheme. And we looked back through the history of greenhouses to see if there are any good examples. And generally speaking, they were all fossil fuel based. But there was this one at Heligan Gardens, which is quite close to the Eden project, that we really got interested in. There was a time in British history when there was quite a craze amongst the aristocracy for growing pineapples. And if you had a fresh pineapple in the middle of your table, it was a sort of ultimate status symbol at the time. And what resulted was a whole range of ingenious little pineapple sheds. But for me, this is by far the best. Because what they did here is they created these stepped beds on which they planted the pineapples, south-facing glass roof. And then on the south side and the north side, they had these double walls. And they loaded fresh manure into that. And just the heat from that decomposing was enough to get the growing area up to a temperature of 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was the first time anyone had grown a zero carbon pineapple in the UK. And of course, that reintroduced the whole subject of waste. Because if we moved away from a conventional approach to waste to a more enlightened approach, you can see that a lot of those waste streams can be turned into building products. So inert waste, which is basically rubble, you can put that into gabion walls and make walls. Paper into insulation, glass, metal, recycles, etc., etc. The big one is biodegradable waste. Nearly 60% of what goes into landfill is biodegradable waste. So if we put that into biodigesters, then that could be the source of our low-grade, the low-grade heat source for our carbon neutral heating system. The first sketch was really quite similar to the pineapple sheds, but massively scaled up. We'd build up these walls out of stockpiled rubble waste. We'd have a south-facing glass roof so that for a lot of the year the building would be self-heating just based on passive solar gain and a lot of thermal mass. And then within those walls we would set these vertical biodigesters so that during the colder times of the year you could draw the heat off those and use that to heat the building. And that started to drive the form of the architecture, because it wasn't just about achieving the biggest clear span. What we needed now was more wall surface area relative to the volume. So that led to this plan form based on 3 overlapping circles. And all those circles you can see around the perimeter are the vertical biodigesters. And if we look at it in section now, you can see some of the ideas I was talking about a few minutes ago, coming in at high level next to a waterfall, circulating around the perimeter through all the different layers of the ecosystem. And then within the walls, you can see the biodigesters. So this is really a sort of city-scale composting operation. And I think we ended up giving the client far more than they expected. It was really quite a small study, a very small fee, and that made it all the more annoying when they didn't do anything with it. But never mind, we did quite a bit more work with Bureau Happold, looking at some of the economic benefits of this approach. And just the value of the heat, landfill tax, compost value, that would give us £9.5 million a year before you have a single visitor through the door. So with that scheme, I think that's a fairly good example of how you can look at the amazing efficiencies of natural systems and closed loop systems and use that as a way of really transforming what is currently a massive problem, landfill, into a huge opportunity. And you know, there was a time, pretty recently actually, when whenever you went to a conference about sustainability, there'd be some architects there talking about it with the diagram of the 3 overlapping circles representing economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And the implication was that you need to be prepared to compromise on each of those and aim for that sort of sweet spot in the middle. Well, I think biomimicry offers a lot of solutions that allow you to get those circles to pretty much overlap and to come up with solutions that are better not just for the planet, but also for people and profit as well. So the third and final part of biomimicry that I'm talking about is learning from natural processes. So this is a scheme that I've been working on since I set up my own company, working with Bill Watts of Max Fordham's office and a chap called Charlie Payton.